I remember I had one individual come into my office just fuming, and you guys are so dumb, and just ripping me up one side and down the other. And I asked him a couple questions, and then all of a sudden, that light bulb moment, he had it.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier.
Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert, and today's guest is going to take us on a journey from Korea, South America, Iraq, OSHA, the Army, and more. So stay tuned. Let's get right into it. With over 20 years of hands-on real-world experience across multiple industries, he brings a rare combination of technical skill, leadership, and a deep, unwavering commitment to safety. He is an OSHA professional, EHS specialist, and former military intelligence expert. He is also a U.S. Army veteran, safety leader, and public speaker. From early beginnings working in farming and welding to deployments in Korea, South America, and Iraq, and later serving as a deputy sheriff, our guest has developed a powerful ability to adapt, problem solve, and connect with people from all walks of life. After transitioning into the oil and gas sector and later working for OSHA, he found his calling in EH&S, where he has spent the last decade championing safety culture across industries. He currently serves as an EHS manager for Ocean Spray. Zach Stublaski, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to have you, and I really appreciate you investing your valuable time with us today, Zach.
I appreciate you having me.
Of course. So like the intro said, we have a lot to cover, and you have a very interesting and diverse background and journey, I'll say, right? So I get right to it, man. What's been your biggest lesson learned in that journey?
Oh gosh, I would say that the biggest thing I've learned is to deal with people, to work with people. And there's a lot of questions, a lot of things that'll come up, but the people, the resources you have around are going to be where you get those answers. And if you can communicate with people and have open dialogue, it makes life so much easier. And
Agreed.
regardless of what task you're performing or what job you're doing.
So on that note, working with people, communicating, collaborating, when did you first realize this? Like, how did you learn this ability or this skill to do this with people?
So that's kind of a loaded question, Jay. I started, like you said, I grew up on a farm, and I actually worked on a dairy farm. So I grew up in a town of about 400 people. So I wasn't much of a social butterfly. I had a pretty good sized family. My parents had 5 kids. So that helped me communicate some, but I communicated with the cattle more than anything, right? And I'd always have a handy 2x4 around if they tried my patience, and realize that when I'm dealing with people, I have to change my approach. I ended up serving a mission for my church. And I spent 2 years in Arizona out serving. And that's where I would say I really learned to communicate with people on varying levels. And now it's easy. When I was talking about something I really had a good understanding of, I found it to be a lot easier to talk to people. And but that allowed me to talk to such a diverse group of people. I was, in Phoenix essentially, and then I was out on the Navajo reservation for 6 months. And so it allowed me to meet all sorts of different people. And some people were very unhappy to see me, while others were happier. And to kind of work through that, I would say one of the things that somebody told me about when I was going through the police academy was verbal judo, right? Is learning how to talk to people and communicate where you kind of de-escalate and get on common ground. And so I would say during that time is where I really excelled or thrived on learning that verbal judo.
So I've never heard verbal judo before. I love that. My dad took, I don't know how advanced he got with judo, but yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Nice.
So kind of going off of that, all these different paths you've taken so far, like, you've learned different skills, right? Like work ethic from farming, critical thinking from military intelligence, observational skills from being a deputy sheriff, unexpectedly converged and make you effective as an EHS leader today. Like, how did that converge? How did that happen?
So, some of the lessons I learned in risk assessment, work ethic, machinery, handling hazardous chemicals, to understanding environmental stewardship or unpredictable nature of the elements, right? All of that kind of came from the farm. Um, Hands-on experience fostered a deep seated understanding of hazard recognition, I would say. The importance of being proactive, right? And the importance of preventative measures as well. And really, those are the cornerstones to any successful EHS program. You need to have self-reliance. You need to have problem-solving skills, and the farm environment translates directly into those. So I would say I also had a lot of bumps and bruises and learn from what not to do while on the farm. We would deal with things, rotating equipment, different things like that, that it just became kind of like what you did. And then I would hear about accidents or incidents that other people had come into, and think about how closely I was a few times to meeting a similar fate. And so that, in addition to my time in the military, my military time definitely further honed those skills, introduced structure and discipline, um, and really a structured and disciplined approach to safety and operational excellence. The military definitely instilled a deep sense of accountability, attention to detail, and the ability to perform under high pressure situations. The rigorous training and following protocols, conducted thorough inspections, and effective communication, right? I mean, you get all sorts of different people, different cultures, different backgrounds in the military, and you've got to be able to communicate. I mean, I always had a good friend of mine that would always say communication is the key, and it truly is. You find that in any industry. And then transitioning from the military to law enforcement, it added another critical layer of expertise in investigation, de-escalation, regulatory compliance. Uh, law enforcement officers or professionals are adept at conducting impartial and thorough incident investigations, and that's something I really take pride in, is going in without bias and trying to really put myself in others' shoes and think about the information the folks had before the incident happened to see why they might have made the decisions they made that led to an incident. And then from that, I got into oil and gas industry, and I started out by working on a drilling rig. I was a drilling fluid engineer. And so working with Halliburton, I got to see all sorts of stuff out on the rig, and all sorts of hazards, right? That those folks had to deal with. Firsthand experience in the industry gave me a deep understanding of the practical challenges that folks face every day in different job functions.
Tons of information, lots of experience. Very, like we started off saying, very diverse. And I want to ask about a couple of things you touched on: the importance of being proactive and having preventive measures. And could you just maybe give us an example of that, Zach? And so it really lands for people. I think you were talking about the farming industry at that time, but how it
Sure.
applies maybe everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is most of these principles, most of these ideas apply in every occupation I've ever been in, right? And like you said, I actually done a lot of different things. I tell people it took me forever to to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And sometimes I feel like I'm still learning. But I would say being proactive, if you just sit still, nothing changes, right? Or it actually gets worse. When we try to keep things status quo, uh, things fall back. I tell people I kind of equate it to being on an escalator going the wrong direction. If you're not always pushing and trying to get further ahead, you're going to go back. You can't sit idle. And so you've got to be proactive and communicating with people and getting feedback and then being out on the floor or in the areas and see what's actually going on. And if you're not doing that, I haven't found a way to make a program work or function as it should without doing those things.
I love that you said being out there on the floor, seeing how things are working, and you're part of the business. You can actually understand it at that point, right?
Absolutely. I think a big thing, and I would always tell people, uh, a lot of times the audio doesn't match the video, right?
Mm.
We talk great games, we talk uh may have the best policies and procedures ever, but if it's not being followed out on the floor, there's a reason for it, but you got to find out what that is and then uh help others to understand that the importance of following those things.
Got it. Got it. And let me jump back to one comment. I think you made it during the law enforcement section of what you were sharing. Regulatory compliance. I'm not sure I've heard regulatory compliance and law enforcement necessarily mentioned in the same conversation in the past.
Sure. Well, what I would say is, uh, in law enforcement, you get to go to emergencies, right? Essentially,
Hmm.
I mean, there are things that come up, and you got to go, and you have to have some basic understanding of the hazards you might run into. Where I worked in law enforcement, I was out in Wyoming and in oil country, oil and gas, right? So I would go out to drilling rigs and different things like that. And so the other thing is we had truckers all through the area that were carrying various products. So a lot of hazardous chemical going through areas. And I remember one time specifically, I had a tanker truck that flipped over. And so I'm out there with my little book, my checking to see what placards meant and how far away I had to keep people, how far away I had to stay. And it's things like that that really opened my eyes to the different hazards that, before that, I would say I'd see trucks with placards and wouldn't think much of it. And now all of a sudden I have a much better understanding of that um, and then learning about regulations, right? And what they are and what they're there for.
Understood. Thanks a lot for expanding on that. I mean, now it totally makes sense. So perfect. What would you say was the most challenging pivot in your career, given all this? And what unexpected lessons did you carry from that transition into your subsequent role?
Well, so I would say one of the biggest transitions for me was I spent 7 years in the military. And in the military, things are very structured. I would say it's stabilized chaos, right? You know what's going to be crazy, but you kind of know what's coming. You know what you signed up for, and it's very easy to understand the requirements. And that really, when I understood all the requirements, it allowed me to excel. I learned very quickly that if I was in the right place, the right time, right uniform, and I maintained my physical fitness, I was set. Everything else was kind of just a bonus. When I went into law enforcement, it was kind of a contrast because um, I often dealt with a lot of, and this was even folks in the department, right? Other officers that you get a lot of alpha personalities. And I'm kind of a quiet guy. And like we talked before, grew up in not many people. So uh, even though now I can talk to people, it's not necessarily my favorite thing to do. And so,
And here you are on a podcast.
right.
Well done, Zach.
But I got to come out of my comfort zone, right, to do
Right.
those things. And so it was an incredibly tough job. Most interactions that I had with people were on some of the worst days of their lives, right? Whether it been an accident, whether there'd been some type of domestic violence, you go through it. There's a whole gambit of things that I would have to deal with. And it wasn't usually meeting people on a good day.
Mhm.
And so I would say that during that time, I really learned more about communicating with people and de-escalation. What I'll find that it helps me now in my career is I'm able to go to talk to people when they're pretty upset about something and kind of work through it with them and get them to kind of calm down a little, I guess is the best way I can put it.
You've mentioned de-escalation a handful of times now, whether it be military or law enforcement, and now, of course, EH&S. Can you give us an example of maybe a more today type situation where you had to de-escalate it? Because I know I would learn from that, as will the audience.
Yeah, so there's been several times throughout my career that I've had to de-escalate, right? And I remember one specifically in law enforcement where I had a truck driver that came into a gas station and he was very upset about an expense that he had bought something. It was a GPS unit, very expensive, and he returned it and he was looking at his pay stub and it didn't show up on there. It was showing that he had paid that, but it was never refunded. And he was blowing up at the clerk, and hence the reason I went out there, right? I got the call and went out there. And when I met him, I said, hey, let's go over here and talk. Let's go through this and see what's going on, and we'll get it figured out. We go and we sat down. We started talking. He's giving me dates and times. I'm taking notes, and he kind of turns his bank statement over to me, and I'm looking at it, and I realized that his bank statement is old, and so it didn't have the updated information. And so once I pointed that out to him, he kind of got red in the face and was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, it makes sense." But I mean, talk about a guy who was ready to throw down with that cashier, right? He was upset. And then all of a sudden, he got to where he understood what was going on and he calmed right down. Other
I
times, oh, sorry, go
just
ahead.
on that one there, I will say I love that example because your situational awareness, I'll call it, was excellent, and your attention to detail. You looked at the date on the statement, and that's what I heard was the
Yep,
kicker for him. That was the turning point, the tipping point, right?
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
excellent. You had another one?
Well, so and also when working for OSHA, a lot of times you'd show up, and again, people aren't usually real excited to see you, although they should be, right? Because you get a second set of eyes, you find out areas of weakness, things that you can improve. So it's all about how we look at things too. And to me, anytime I can find things that I need to. Now, usually I have enough things that I need to work on, so I don't need people pointing them out. But you know what I mean. It's good
Mm-hmm.
to have that second set of eyes. But there are a lot of times you'd go in and start talking to people, and then they just didn't have a clear understanding of all the regulatory requirements. And um, you know, I guess there's so many and so many challenges that these companies face, especially if they're smaller companies. Not a lot of people getting all this stuff done it's all the reason to have a safety professional in your company, right? I mean, there is so much out there that folks need to stay up on and uh, um, stay at the forefront so that they can keep their folks safe at their facilities. So I think just seeing some of the folks that I got to work with there and they'd kind of have that light bulb moment where they'd go, "Oh, I understand now why I need to do this." And just a few different times, a handful of times that I seen that happen, and I don't know, I guess I'm always happy to see that light bulb moment, right? When people actually go, "I get it."
Hey, rock stars. If you're tuning into the podcast and are feeling overwhelmed by all the maintenance demands at your facility, don't stress. We've got you covered. Our sponsor, Coludis, is your go-to partner to help you tackle all those demands and get them done right, on time, and with top-notch quality. From project planning to execution, Coludis is there to make hard work easy. Visit coludis.com today to get started. Oh, it's got to be so satisfying. It must be. Now, you returned to the paper mill, I believe, right after your time with OSHA. What changes or initiatives did you bring back to the mill that were potentially driven by your experience with OSHA?
I would say I had very eye-opening experience going to work for OSHA because as a young safety professional, you hear about all these different things with OSHA and how you're going to be excited for this and excited for that. And then working for OSHA, you start to realize that, they're there for a reason. They're there to help companies, to help workers, to keep people safe. They're not necessarily out there to go get you and find every little thing and, pick you apart, right?
Mhm.
I would say that depends on how companies respond and how they react. But I would say the big things I learned was other companies, other industries all struggle with truly the same issues. And I know when I was at the paper mill the first time, I struggled with a lot of things that I felt we couldn't get traction on. We couldn't get leadership to maybe take serious enough to make adjustments and to put funding into, or whatever it was that we needed. And then when I went to work for OSHA, I realized, doggone it, everybody has these same issues. It's consistent. It's, lockout tagout is a challenge for so many industries. Confined space, all of these things that we deal with on a regular basis. You look at it and go, man, that's really across the board. Companies struggle with those things. And so it also, having worked for OSHA and seeing so many different companies, I got to see a lot of good things, right? Like I got to see certain lockout tagout procedures that I go, man, that's a good way to do this, and bring that back to the mill and kind of share those lessons learned and examples of first class type safety things. And so I would say the lockout tagout would be a good example of that, and the line break, things like that.
It's a couple things I want to jump back to there, Zach. But first, I'll share. Gave me a little PTSD with lockout tagout because years back, a facility manager called us around 11 o'clock at night, said, "You lock. Where's the key? You got to be here." And he had to cut our lock. Right, this happens.
Yeah.
But no, completely get that. What I want to key in on too, it's not the first time this has come up on the show, and it's highly relevant to our audience and our listeners. You mentioned how companies react to OSHA is pivotal. That wasn't your word, but that's what I heard there. Can you just expand on that? Like, what do you mean by that? What could you educate people about on that topic?
Well, I would say that a lot of times you see OSHA come in and companies get scared. They go, how much is this going to cost us, right? I mean, and that's initially what comes to people's mind when you say OSHA came for a visit. But the reality is all the folks that I worked with at OSHA, they're there to help the companies. And I get it. There's financial burdens and financial things that do come along with it. But the reality is the folks that work there, they're looking to help the companies, help them find ways and ideas to reduce the risk in the facility. And so they can be your best friend. I mean, I know I would even call OSHA when I had a question, because I'm going, I got nothing to hide. I'm going to ask anyone who's got experience and anyone who maybe sees a lot of different ways of doing things when it comes to safety programs, because I don't know it all by any means, and I've got a lot to learn still. But using those resources and really look at that as being a resource. Not to say I want OSHA showing up here right now, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, that's great advice. Great advice. Thank you. I want to touch on something because early on you had a hands-on background, as a welder, a mechanic. You worked on a farm. You mentioned the 2x4. That was a funny example I've never heard before. And did that practical ground level understanding influence your approach to developing, say, safety protocols or interacting with operational teams today? Do you find it helps build credibility?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I I can I understand where the folks are coming from. The folks that do the work every day, because I was one, right? I did that. Um, and I had to deal with some new policies and different things that would come about that you wouldn't understand why. I remember as a welder, we'd be getting a policy that would come out, and you go, "It makes no sense. We haven't done it for the entire time." I'd have some of the older guys go, "Never in my career have I had to do this," and uh, get real upset about it. And so I can see where folks are coming from. And so what I learned from that is that I've got to be very transparent. I've got to, and again, I'll beat a dead horse here with communication's the key, right? You've got to
Mhm.
communicate the why. Why are we implementing those things? There are some things where you're not always going to get people to understand it. Sometimes it's a requirement. So you go, all right, it's a requirement. But 9 times out of 10, I'm able to pull examples of why we do certain things. In fact, when I'd worked for oil and gas, I had a really good friend of mine that uh, he had worked in oil and gas his whole career, probably 30, 40 years almost. And he was exposed to benzene all the time. It was not uncommon. I mean, we smell it in gasoline. We get it out of the ground there. And he was exposed to it on a regular basis. And we know how everybody loves to wear their respirators. And
Mm.
so early on in his career, not even required, not even a thought. As we learn more about the hazards associated with it, it becomes a requirement. But you can imagine how many people fought that, right? And he
Mhm.
even admitted that he was one of them. Now, it took him a few years, and then all of a sudden he goes, "You know what? Maybe that is not the right way to do it. I'm going to start wearing my respirator." And he did. And then, of course, he retired, and shortly after was diagnosed with cancer. And
Mm.
the doctors even said that it was most likely due to his overexposure of benzene. And
Mm.
shortly after, he passed away. And so
Mm.
uh, sometimes we have rules and regulations because uh, what I'd say is that they don't immediately bite us. They don't immediately hit us. I would love that if you got too close to benzene that you'd get a headache or a stomach ache or a slap across the face. I don't care. Something that would get your attention and go, I can't be doing this. And unfortunately, there's so many things out there, so many hazards that we don't know enough about it. And it's hard to get people talked into taking proper precautions. And so
Yeah.
that's one of them, right? Is benzene.
Zach, if I could on that note, this is really important. What couple of things I heard you say, always communicate the why and give examples. And my follow-up question is this: what advice would you give others in your role or a similar role or best practices? And maybe it is simply the why and give examples, but is there anything else that you have found to be very effective with resistance to doing something new, anything new?
Yeah, I would say definitely give the why, give examples, get out there and talk to people, get an
Mm.
understanding of why they don't want to do it. Um, a lot of times I'd find we put things in place that make their jobs harder in a lot of different ways. And sometimes, as safety professionals or somebody, kind of implementing different rules at locations, we don't understand the specifics and how it makes their job harder. And I find that if you can have that open dialogue and work with them on finding a way to meet the requirement, but yet allow for them to do it in a maybe a better way, that changes everything, right? It
Mm.
gets them on board with the change and with the system, and um, I think just working together like that is really what improves the culture and the safety.
Is great advice, and I'm gonna say what I'm hearing is it comes back to communication and be on the floor and really what they would say, understand why they don't want to do it.
Yeah, There's
Because you
always
don't
a
know
reason.
that, how can you influence it, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well said. Um, there's something that I don't think you and I have previously talked about this, but with facilities and EH&S, like we've had other guests on the show have talked about that relationship and how it should be very complementary to each other. How do you find that to be for you and your teams?
Yeah, I would say that that you have to complement each other. You have to work together, hand in hand. You can't. Uh, I've seen it many different ways. I've worked with a lot of different safety professionals, right? And some I would see come in, and they were the hard chargers. They were the ones that said, "It's my way or the highway." The requirement says this, so this is what you're going to do, and I don't want to hear any questions. Let's drive on. And I've never seen that work real well, and I'm not saying it can't. In the military, that would work great, but a lot of times people have choices, and especially out in the market conditions that we are experiencing now, you've got to work with people and get them to really understand and work with you on improving the whole situation. And so I work closely with operations, maintenance, the whole team because it's one team, one fight. We've got to all chip in and work together.
Excellent. Why don't you just talk about your what I perceive as your continuous, you're a lifelong learner. That's how I'm perceiving you and how I'm getting to know you. And, given that you've embraced continuous learning, earning multiple degrees later in your career, what advice would you give to someone who's possibly mid-career, right, and considering a significant shift or further education to pursue a passion, maybe something like EH&S?
What I would say is that always keep an open mind. Always continue to strive to learn. Um, it's always easier to learn about things you're passionate about. And so that's one thing I continue to do. I love listening to different podcasts, yours included, right? That I get to hear from so many different people and ideas, and that's so beneficial because anytime I think I know it all, then it's going to be a problem. I need to make sure I'm always open to different ideas and thoughts, and I think that's what's going to continue to, allow me to stay in this career for a long time, right? Is when I get so set in my ways and I got no room for hearing anything else, I would say it would be a failure on my part as an EHS professional.
Outstanding. I don't know if I asked you this specifically earlier on or if you've covered it, but with your military and your law enforcement, days and like critical situations, high pressure situations, how would you suggest problem solving in your role today versus or maybe complementary to what you learned back then? And we may have covered a little bit of this, but another take on that?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is don't get too excited. Don't get so overly excited that you can't think straight, right? Take it one piece at a time. First thing, of course, is you're going to protect your own health, your own safety. Make sure you're safe, right? Because if you're not, then you're not going to do any good for anyone. Then they're going to have to come in and help you. And then next, focus on your friends or your coworkers. Make sure they're safe, and then just continue to expand. And I think the big thing is uh, don't lose your head, right? You got to kind of keep that calm demeanor and just think through it one step at a time.
I love that you said keep yourself safe because how could I'm thinking how could you possibly help someone else if you're not okay yourself?
That's right.
Right. So a little maybe a pivot here, but of all these different topics we've talked about, right? What would you say is the most challenging situation, I guess, in any of your career moves that you've faced? How did you deal with or mitigate it, you and your team? And then what measures have you possibly put in place to avoid such an occurrence in the future? I gave you a lot of layers there. You want to break it down
Wow.
again?
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
just most challenging situation, right? Like what was it? How did you deal with it? How'd you mitigate it?
Well, what I'd say is most challenging was again dealing with people,
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with people when emotions are high.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I had a little bit of that in every situation, every career I've been in, and I had to some degree, but law enforcement definitely was more prevalent with that. You know, you show up at somebody's house and they're in the middle of a domestic dispute, and just trying to get people separated and then working through and really be open to listening. And again, I guess Stephen R. Covey had a good point, right? With make sure you're listening to actually understand what they're talking about, and don't just listen to respond. And so that's huge. If people know you're willing to listen and take to heart what they're saying, um, which I think you can do with anyone on any topic. Well, for the most part, right? Um, you've got to be willing to do that and actually hear where they're coming from. Understand that our backgrounds are probably way different, but we can still find some common ground. Um, and then kind of bring things down. You know, get things to a calmer level, to where you
Sure.
can actually have a good conversation and get your point across, and they can get their point across, and you can build from there. Um, I would say one good example too. When working at the paper mill, I'd had a few people that would get pretty excited about different things that would come out and different policies, and they would get downright mad. And I remember I had one individual come into my office just fuming, and you guys are so dumb, and just ripping me up one side and down the other. And I asked him a couple questions, and then all of a sudden that light bulb moment, he had it, and he's like, oh, so that's what this is about? Yep. And life was good. And in fact, the day he left the mill, he came to me and he thanked me for that. And he said, I'll never forget that. And so that really sticks with me, right? Is whenever you can get people to have those moments and
Mm-hmm.
and help them understand that we're not here just to make their lives harder, but we're actually here to help.
You have such a good way about you, Zach, and like what everything I'm hearing points to a positive culture, whether it's the interaction with other departments or just the people that surround you. Do you think there's one crucial element to building a good culture, kind of regardless of industry? But what any advice on that for everyone listening?
Okay, here's my broken record moment, right? Is
Oh,
communication.
mm,
You got to be able to communicate. It's got to be two-way, right? You lose if you go and um, I've gone to meetings before where I'm the only one talking and not getting any interaction, any feedback, and I know then it's not being well received, and it's not going to be heeded or taken to heart. And so then as I'm training, I'm thinking about how am I going to get out on the floor or get this into the hearts and minds of the folks I'm trying to get it to. And so um, like I said, communication's key.
yeah, and it keeps coming back to that, so it completely makes sense, and I agree with you. Now here's the most challenging question of the day, right? So Zach, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself at the start of, say, your professional career?
Oh, wow. I would say um, just continue to drive focus and continue to push forward on whatever it is I want to do. I started working on my neighbor's dairy farm when I was 12 years old, and uh, there were times where that was very challenging to wake up early and to do all that. It required that I didn't play any sports. I didn't, go out on the weekends or do anything like that. But I just continued to drive and keep that focus. And I would say that's probably the one of the most important things for me in my life, is just to begin with the end in mind, right? I'm thinking about
Mm,
um, the future and kind of what I want to see and what I want to be in the future. And so I just continue to drive towards that. And I would say my faith is a big part of that, right? And so I look at not necessarily just this life, but the afterlife as well. And so that's where my big focus is. And so I want to make sure that I'm doing those things that I need um, to
That's
get there.
excellent. 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 You've taught us a ton. We've covered a lot of topics today. Thank you for that. And I mean, before we start to wrap up the show, we want to hear a little bit more about you. I want to hear a little bit more about you. Like you have a family, right? You've got kids. What does Zach do outside of his professional life? What could you tell us?
Well, I'm usually busier than I want to be. My wife and I, we have 5 kids. My oldest is 12, and then I've got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. Into sports, so we're going to either soccer, baseball, softball, or my daughter's in gymnastics. And then my 4-year-old, he's autistic, and so he keeps us busy. But man, I learn so much from him every day. He's the happiest little guy, and always brings such joy to me whenever I see him. If I'm having a bad day, that's the greatest thing, to just come home and see him and have him smile and say, "Dad." And so,
that is wonderful, man.
yeah,
Great.
yeah. So my wife and I stay busy with the kids. That's really what our life revolves around, and so it's awesome.
I can tell you're radiating. I can tell. It's busy, but it's outstanding, and
That's right.
and you're showing it right now. That's awesome.
Good.
Well, Zach, how would people get in touch with you if they wanted to learn more about any of the number of topics or your path to get to where you are today? How would you suggest?
So email is probably the best, or LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. But email, it's my first and last name, zach.stublaski@gmail.com. And
Okay.
so by all means, I'd love to hear from folks. And yeah, it's always great to build my network. And it just helps put more tools in the toolbox, right? And so I know I don't have all the answers, and so that's what I love about things like this, right? Is that you're able to kind of get different points of view and different ideas. And man, my grandpa always said, and it's probably not the best way to put it, but he always said, "It's a piss poor day when you don't learn something." And so that's kind of the mindset I got to have, right? I always got to try to learn something.
That's great. That's great. Agreed. Like, we only know what we know, right?
That's right.
If you don't have an open mind, like you're not learning. You're not.
That's it.
So.
Yes, sir.
Zach, thank you so much for spending all this time with us on the show. It's been amazing talking to you and getting to know you even better.
Likewise, Jay, I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. And thank you very much to everyone tuning in and listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, like, subscribe, and we'll see everyone next time.
It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.